Welcome back to another episode of Talk Dead to Me. I am your host, Johnny Odell. I'm the social media manager for The Walking Dead. And how are you guys today? I'm doing great, and that is because we are finally back for a new Walking Dead episode. It has been a while. Thanks, COVID. In case you guys have been living under a rock or just been binging Dexter in your home in your pajamas like me, AMC pulled a Euphoria and added 6 bonus episodes to the end of Season 10 to hold us over until Season 11 airs, whenever that may be. It's going to be the final season. I'm very sad about it, but today we're not going to be sad. We're going to be happy because The Walking Dead is finally back in our lives. Now, over the next 6 weeks, I have some amazing guests that I can't wait for you guys to hear the interviews for. One of those amazing guests is Kirsten Acuna. She's a personal friend and also the writer, reporter, amazing talent over there at Insider. She covers The Walking Dead. She talks to the cast and producers. She also covers a lot of your other favorite shows and movies. And I'm so excited for you to hear what kind of insight she has for these bonus episodes. This is Kirsten Acuna. Kirsten Acuna, how's it going today?
Good. Thanks for having me back. I have
Of
my
course. You got your Rick
friends.
mug. The listeners can't see it, but I'm going to describe it. It's a white mug with a drawn Andrew Lincoln, and then there's some splotches behind him. Very Etsy-ish, but also something you would want in your cupboard. It's great.
Yeah, I went for like an entire year without this mug, and when I came back to Jersey, I finally was like, well, I need this while I'm watching The Walking Dead. So this is my mug for every Sunday night now.
What do you know about how these bonus episodes came together?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. And I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. And I think we've talked about this a little bit. I had seen the bonus 6 episodes as a way to hold fans over. That was how it was described to me originally.
Okay.
While they were waiting to, just roll out season 11. And I think it was also like them testing the waters a little bit of like, how can we get back to filming something? Because these episodes they were described as more self-contained episodes. They probably knew, hey, we can't have, a bunch of zombies everywhere. Angela Kang said this to Entertainment Weekly. Scott Gimple said this to me. And so we saw when those descriptions for the 6 episodes had come out a while back, you had the sense that these episodes were going to be a little bit different. We see that like they are pairings of, Aaron and Gabriel. We saw that there was going to be like a Here's Negan episode. So you feel like that's going to be just more centered around Negan. I think it's really about putting safety first, right? And and they were thinking, I think Scott Gimple worded it to me as we were thinking about producibility. And I think that they used these 6 episodes as a way to figure out how are we going to move forward with being able to make another season then, and also to go like, can we film this and can we do this safely? And if so, then we can feel comfortable filming Fear again. We can feel comfortable filming the next and final season of World Beyond. And that's what's going on right now. They have all 3 shows for the first time ever in history filming simultaneously.
Right.
And I think that the other thing to think about there was, I think we talked about this a little bit in the past. I strongly felt this way. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that you felt this way. I thought that we were going to have at least 12 seasons of The Walking Dead. And so then when these 6 episodes were announced, shortly afterwards, we got the announcement for the final season 11. Shocked us a little bit, but then they announced that was going to be 24 episodes. We'll think about that as a whole, right? That's 30 episodes.
Right.
So basically, you almost have 2 more seasons there because a season is usually 16 episodes. So for me, I looked at it and I was like, oh, well, maybe this is a way of just kind of like delivering 2 final seasons. And I had asked Angela about this, I think back in the fall when we discussed 10/16, and I asked her specifically about that. I was like, this kind of feels like it's just 2 final seasons combined. And she was like, yeah, that's kind of like what season 11 will be, because it is like that giant extra pack season. One other thing I wanted to touch upon, because I know that we talked about this a little bit and we thought it was a really big deal. And I'm so glad that I wound up writing about it, because you were like, no, like you should do something on it. And I was like, I don't know if it's like too in the weeds, but the final season and these new 6 episodes, when they air, some people have already seen it on AMC Plus, but if the episodes look and feel a little bit different, it's because they're being filmed digitally for the first time.
Yes, thank God.
And they look really good. And and I checked in with AMC just to be like, I just want to make sure like these are being filmed digitally, right? And I was like, are you just doing this for the 6 episodes? Are we doing this for season 11? And they're doing that moving forward. And that's another change because of the pandemic. Angela Kang sent us a statement just saying, confirming that, and then saying that there are fewer touch points if they film digitally because they don't have to stop and they don't have to change the reel again.
Yeah.
And these are things that you don't think about, but it was a big deal historically because they're used to film it. Like they were adamant about never changing the digital. Like they considered it before in the past. They considered it after season 1. I know, because one of the cinematographers had spoken about it in 2016, and they had considered it a few years back. I think maybe when Angela took over, she spoke to Variety about it, and they were like, no, we still wanted to continue filming on 60 millimeter, and I think 32. I don't want to misspeak off the top of my head, but I know like 16 millimeter for sure is one of them that they were filming on.
Yeah, I get it. And as I've said in previous podcasts, I've been railing against this since I started the podcast. And way before then, that in season 1 and 2, the film did help the story. It was like when New York is in a movie and it's like another character, basically. Like the film really does give it some kind of raw character. And with digital, though, like I just feel like everyone just kind of lapped Walking Dead in terms of quality. So when we're having these night scenes, like I rewatched Stalker the other night, and the one with Beta coming out of the grave, and most of it takes place at night, and it's just like you can't see half of it. You have to strain your eyes. It's kind of like the Battle of Winterfell in season 8 of Game of Thrones, but that was filmed digitally. I don't know what was going on with the lighting. I remember when they blamed our TVs. They're like, well, maybe your TVs aren't nice enough. And it's like, okay, HBO, maybe you guys aren't filming this right.
For HBO, actually, for those Game of Thrones episodes, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that's what I've thought of also watching Walking Dead. And I brought that up to Angela at one point when some of the episodes in like season 10 were looking a little too dark and whatnot. And then they were telling me about ways that they like backlit certain things. Anyway, because I think one of them, the episodes where they were at the hilltop, I felt like I was able to see a bit better, when they were attacking Hilltop. But
yeah, well, that's because everything was on fire.
Okay, I'll go with that. But with Game of Thrones, our correspondent Kim Renfro had to do an entire explainer on like, hey, here's how you need to change your TV settings in order to watch Game of Thrones. I'm like, I gotta do homework to watch.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I have a 4K TV. I do not need to change shit. You guys need to light that better. I don't care what we're talking about. Frost zombies. So, don't be like, well, it's supposed to look like this. Make it look better.
How do you think that's just because you mentioned HBO, that makes me think of not to like go off tangent a little bit, but really quick, like, I love The Last of Us. I played that as a video game, and I think a bunch of us who love this genre are going to go from Walking Dead over to The Last of Us. So that kind of makes me wonder, how's the lighting going to be?
I mean, I don't know. We'll see. That's true. Well, anyway, I'm just glad to see it. It's for me, it's night and day looking at 10/17 going into this week's episode, the premiere. It looks great. And finally, I almost wish you didn't tell me that they had thought about doing digital so long ago, or even in season 9 when Angela took over, because season 9 should have been digital. But I will say that they changed the cinematography up a little bit. And, with the sweeping like drone shots, I think Cudlitz did that in 907. You're like, oh my God, this is how The Walking Dead should look.
I agree.
Thank God.
Yeah. So let's talk more about 10/17.
Let's talk about the episode.
I wrote so many notes. What do you want to talk about first?
Okay, well, I think the first obvious thing is that Maggie is back from her vacation on ABC. So how do you feel about Maggie returning to The Walking Dead and Lauren Cohan specifically?
I mean, I love that this episode was so Maggie centric. I also, for one thing, I loved Whiskey Cavalier, and I was a little sad that they didn't bring it back. It was actually, I had found out from ABC. I was at an event right when it was canceled that it was the last show that they decided to axe. And
oh, really?
Yeah, I thought that was unfortunate. And I had told the person who was, I believe, the president of ABC, like at the time. I want to get her first name wrong, but I went up to her and I was like, I just think that you guys didn't have this in a great time slot. It was like 10 p.m. on Wednesdays because
Oh yeah, who's that for?
I remember Lauren Cohen was doing like Whiskey Wednesdays, which I thought was really cute. Like she was doing that on Twitter with her followers and stuff to watch along. And like my mom, and I think a lot of other like moms and just people who like loved Lauren Cohen from The Walking Dead and who wanted to support watching that show, like working moms were just like, that's too late for us. Like that was too late for my mom. And she was like, sometimes I would forget then, or like maybe I would watch it like another day. And I was just like, yeah, that's just not a great, why wasn't
Didn't pass the mom test, which is a very important test.
I think so. I mean, or at least like if you're trying to draw Walking Dead fans over, like I don't think 10 p.m. is a great slot for a new show, but that's just my thing. But seeing Maggie back on this episode and the fact that they gave her, like this was her episode really, and she had so many great scenes. She had great scenes with Judith. I want to talk about like a whole bunch of these. She had great scenes with Judith. She had great scenes. That small scene with Negan, I think, was one of my favorite parts of the episode. And then the scene with Daryl was like brought tears to my eyes. I mean, we saw that tease basically in the trailers, but when she's anytime that she's talking about Glenn and the fact that like she went to talking about the season 7 premiere, which I always feel like The Walking Dead kind of like backed away from because that was when a lot of fans left the show, and I was like, oh, I guess we're gonna finally go back there because we haven't seen Maggie really touch and talk a lot about that trauma in her life. So that was really great to see. And then I really liked her small scene with Angel Theory, where they kind of connected over like the bond of lost sisters, because there was a small moment, and you have to be aware of like, oh yeah, Maggie lost, well, she's lost so many people, but she specifically has also lost some sisters. So, she goes off and she yells at Angel Theory in this Kelly in this one specific scene when she's like, you weren't at your post. And then Daryl's kind of like, she kind of lost her sister. We don't know where her sister's missing is what I think what Daryl says.
Yeah.
But when Daryl says those words, her sister is missing, that was probably so triggering for Maggie to hear, having dealt with missing sisters specifically, right? And all of a sudden you see the tone in her delivery change and like everything change about like how she is with Kelly. And I thought that was a really beautiful moment.
Yeah, the Maggie Kelly bond was something I did not expect, and it's probably my favorite unexpected pairing of these 6 episodes, that you would have no idea that these two would get along. The Walking Dead kind of probably accidentally has a penchant for not having characters talk like for entire seasons. Like Carol and Negan didn't meet until season 9, I think.
Yeah, that is insane. It's insane.
It's insane because I know that Carol was doing her little sabbatical at the Kingdom for a bit, but she knew about Negan. She fought a war against Negan, had still not met this man. Kind of like a, like probably how like a Thanos Scarlet Witch kind of thing, where you're just like, who are you? But it was, he's like, why are you so mad at me? I don't even know who you are. But no, that was a great pairing. And yeah, having Maggie back in the show is great, whether she was originally supposed to come back, whether she's supposed to stay all along, however they originally intended her character story arc to be. I'm glad she's back. It adds a lot to the show.
I know. Look, Angela and I talked about this for probably since the moment that Maggie left the show, right? On Rick's final episode. That was something that always I was very upset about. The fans were very upset about, because no one realized that was supposed to be Lauren Cohen's final episode. And I felt like they were kind of just sweeping her under the rug. Like they never did justice by her. And I guess that they always probably thought that they were going to revisit her storyline, or they wanted to revisit her storyline. I know, like every time I talked to Angela after that, she was always like, yeah, we're having, like, I'm constantly having conversations with Lauren. We're in touch. Like, I think that they always wanted to try to close her story up in some way anyway.
Sure.
So I think that this, unfortunately, her show being canceled, that was kind of, it was a bittersweet thing, because I think Lauren really did want to go on and like probably do other stuff. Sure. But at the same time, like it's nice seeing her her back.
It really came at a good time for AMC because Michonne or Denai was leaving. So,
Right,
you
right.
lose one giant female protagonist, but you get another one back. I think the story would have been fine without either, but because they always find a way, but still you need that like strong character. And with Carol kind of being on the edge of her sanity, like, you need it. And, Lauren Ridloff going off to do MCU stuff.
Mhm.
It's nice to actually have someone, especially an OG, back.
Well, we probably would have seen Lauren Ridloff in one of these 6 episodes if her schedule didn't have a conflict, because that was something I asked Angela about a while back, and she was like,
Yeah.
she just had a scheduling conflict, and she was like, but we will have. She had teased that there will be like some big episode for Connie in season 11. So that's, looking forward to that. But I mean, it does stink that we have to wait that much longer to see her again, since like we haven't seen her then since what, like last March.
Yeah, I was shocked there wasn't a bonus episode dedicated to her, because I think Eternals had already shot, and she had already shot Sound of Metal, I imagine. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
she had another project she's working on. I mean,
Yeah.
Lauren Ridloff is killing the game right now. Very excited
Mm-hmm.
for her. All right,
Mm-hmm.
so let's get right to Maggie and Carol. They had a really great scene at Hilltop and a few other
Uh-huh.
good scenes. What did you love the most?
Going into this episode, I just want to say first that I was expecting every single one of these episodes to feel more self-contained. Like I thought
Sure.
that this episode was going to be Maggie, Daryl, maybe Negan, and I don't know, maybe like Elijah and whoever else Maggie was with. I was
Mhm.
not expecting to see Maggie interact with so many characters. I was not expecting Judith to be there. I was not expecting, I wasn't expecting the Carol moment. Like I wasn't expecting to see, I think Cassidy has like a small brief like moment at the top of the episode. Like
Does
she doesn't
she?
really, yeah, you see her, Cassie McClincy like walks
Oh, yeah,
by,
you're right. You're right.
yeah,
She walks by.
and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
in the
yeah.
wagon. But like one of my great concerns going into these 6 episodes was that they were just going to feel kind of like bottle episodes, right? And I felt like this premiere actually felt like a premiere because we
Mhm.
did see such a roster of characters. So I was surprised by that. And then I thought that the writing was most strong in that Carol and the Maggie and the Daryl scene for sure, which I'm sure you wanna discuss, but also the Maggie and Carol moment, because Maggie realizes that Carol was the one who let Negan out of the cell before Carol even says it. And I think for me, old
Yeah.
Walking Dead would have had Carol deliver that line, but
Yeah.
the fact that they let Maggie make that leap, I was just like, oh wow, yeah. I felt like the old Walking Dead wouldn't have. I felt like they maybe wouldn't have even connected those dots at all, or would have
Mhm.
never have had that sort of conversation. So for me, it was just a really satisfying. It was really satisfying to see that small moment, and then for Maggie, I mean, what an awful moment to see. Like she's been through so much with so much loss, but like
Mhm.
she lost the hilltop where like they buried Glenn, and then the moment that came to mind for me, and I don't know if other people are going to think about this, but I was just like, she had all those beautiful family portraits in that home.
Oh my
And
gosh, yeah, all oil-based too, so they're gone.
yeah, so I mean, I thought that Lauren Riddle, I thought that Lauren Cohen just killed it with like the facial expressions in this
Mhm.
episode. I felt like she said so much with just the way that she was looking at people, like the way that she looks at Negan at the very start of the episode. The fact that she's like, "You're not even worth wasting my breath on, or like
Right.
wasting any words on." Um, that was such a powerful moment. That was actually something Angela and I spoke about a bit on the
Mm.
phone, because I was like, okay, are we going to get more of Maggie and Negan
Yeah.
like in these 6 episodes? Because we kind of know, like, we know what 1018 is going to be about. We know that we're getting like an Aaron and a Father Gabriel episode. And
Mhm.
then Angela said to me that we are going to get more Maggie and Negan at some point. So I'm wondering if like in the Here's Negan episode, which is supposed to be the quote unquote finale, I guess we can call it, of these
Mhm.
bonus. I don't really know how we were referring to these bonus
They
episodes exactly.
I've been referring to it as 10C, even though it's not a full 8 episodes. but it just made sense to refer to it as 10C. So I've just been saying 10C, 10C. And now when you look at the AMC press portal where you get all the images, it says it now separates it into 10C.
I did notice that.
So
And
I
yeah,
think that they've just embraced it and they're just like, that makes sense. It's a shorter, third of a season, but still whatever, 10C. So I'm just going to call it 10C.
I mean, I think that makes sense because way back on another podcast when we were talking about what is season 11 going to be and how are they going to break those episodes, and Gimple had said to me, I asked, I was like, do you think you're going to break those into 888 into like 3 parts?
Mm-hmm.
So then you have 11A, 11B, 11C, and he's like, that might be what we do, And I was just like, so now that we see that they have like a 10C precedent, I'm already feeling like,
sure.
yeah, we can totally have an 11C.
This is another silver lining of the pandemic, which sounds weird to say, but we get sort of these in-between purgatory episodes where we saw it in Euphoria as well. Did you see those episodes at all? I don't know if you're a fan of Euphoria.
I watched part of one and I just hadn't gotten around to watching both of them. But you're absolutely right. We're getting some content that we would have never received if it wasn't for the pandemic. Those 2 episodes, we have these 6 episodes. We have Malcolm and Marie, which Zendaya also like filmed for Netflix during the pandemic. I think we're going to see a lot of things like this coming up.
Yeah, a lot of interesting sort of format changes, which is fun. I will say the fans will regard some of these episodes as filler. Some of them do feel a little fillery, and I know that's a pejorative term. One of the episodes, I intend for it to be a pejorative term, but anyway, we'll get to that down the line. But no, these episodes, I think they fill out story, and 1017 is not, I don't think in any way you can really count as a filler episode. I think it does move the story forward, maybe not in terms of plot so much, but as, in terms of character development, character relationships. I love that Carol, going back to that for a second, was so bold to just tell Maggie, look, I let Negan out. Okay. I could lie to you and I could tell everyone else to lie to you and we can just pretend, but this is what happened. And yeah, I love that Maggie also made that jump herself.
But you know what? Maybe she wanted to be straight with Maggie for, a few reasons. One, she knew that that Maggie was going to find out, right? Regardless. But then also, I wonder if for Carol, she was thinking back to what went wrong with her relationship with Michonne. And remember, they weren't speaking for a long time, and it felt like they just weren't communicating to one another. So I bet you part of Carol was just like, I got to just lay it out on the table. And like, maybe that's going to cause a rift in our relationship for a little bit, but like, I'd rather be honest up front right now than try and like, hide whatever.
It's like that Twitter meme going around where it's like, you weren't there, and it's like 4 images of something nostalgic. And, I would do, if Carol would make one, I guess, and it would be like Alpha and then like heads on spikes. And it's like, you weren't there, Maggie. Okay. You didn't get how fucking scary it was to just be alive in the same, 50-mile radius of Alpha. So we had to do something.
I think Maggie respects it though, because during her conversation with Daryl, I think she references it very slightly, like Carol's decision, because Maggie is a mother and she recognizes that Carol is also a mother, and she recognized that Carol lost someone, who she considered a child. And she knows that, Carol's lost other children.
Yes.
And so I think Maggie was probably able to empathize with that and be like, if this happened to my little boy, what would I have done in that moment? Maybe I also would have let Negan go and would have considered him expendable and would have said like, sure, you go and risk your life for our community, and maybe you'll make it out. And then, but if you don't make it out, like that's kind of what you deserve, maybe because of what you did, in the past, So we don't know what decisions Maggie would have made under those circumstances.
It would have been interesting. I've always been a Maggie fan, but I love how Angela opened up her character when she took over. When we see, we do that minor time jump and we see Maggie at Hilltop with baby Herschel, and she is running shit. And she's like, what? Someone like tried to assassinate our people? Cool. Guess what? You're getting hung tonight, dude. And like, she was like an even bigger badass. That seems like a limiting term. She was just such a I don't know, you felt like she's really come into her own, and it was great to see her continue that comeback when we came back. One thing, I think the fans will be disappointed by how little Maggie Negan scenes there are and how
Yeah.
brief they are. But I think the
Yeah.
whole point is just they have like a mile of unsaid things between them. So, and that is something I'm sure they'll explore. I mean, in the comics at this point, they exile Negan because they're like, you just
Right.
don't fit in our society. Thank you for helping with the Whisperer War, but we need you out of here because it's just too much shit has happened. Good luck. We're not going to kill you. Goodbye. And that's the last we see of him until the last issue. And then he has
Right.
like an after issue, but still. So we'll see what they do with Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character. It's kind of like having like someone's toxic ex-boyfriend like stay in the friend group. You're like, why is he here?
Yeah. So, I mean, a few things off of that. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, Angela did say this was something I asked her specifically. I was like, are we going to see more of this Maggie and Negan dynamic? And she was like, yes, we're not going to like shy away from that.
Great.
And that was so going off of that, that was something that excited me that they were exploring because over on Fear the Walking Dead, we saw that the Walking Dead universe was kind of opening itself up to saying like, we're going to have a reckoning, you know, with Negan's kind of problematic past. And we saw that with Sherry, and we saw that she was still going through PTSD because of trauma, you know, associated with Negan. And I took out part of this quote that Angela and I had that we spoke about. Yes. So let me see what I have here. But basically, you know, I had asked Angela, I was like, what was it like for you guys to go back and revisit, you know, the events of it seems like we're revisiting the events of 616 and 701, which obviously a very painful moment for Maggie, but also a very painful moment for the fandom, because I had mentioned to you, like, this is when a lot of fans kind of dropped off of The Walking Dead. And I feel like the show sometimes doesn't want to acknowledge that at all because, you know, let's just move forward. But because we saw them kind of rewind on Fear to going back to acknowledging this problem, I was like, it seems like we're going to do the same with Maggie, and that we're going to like revisit this trauma that she experienced. And Angela was like, yeah, that's what we're doing. And she said, we really felt, so this is the quote, we really felt that we had to be true to Maggie's journey and what she's been going through. And, you know, as a character, just the deep, deep trauma that she went through with Glenn's death. And can you truly ever forgive or come to any kind of terms with the person that was responsible for such a horrific thing? So I think even for those of us that are working on the show, it sort of was a heartbreaking thing for us to do creatively as well. Because I asked her specifically, I was like, was it difficult for you guys as writers and people working on the show to also revisit that moment that maybe like doesn't hold, you know, the best memories, or for you guys, because it was so, I didn't word it like
your husband's
that, but
eye like falling out of his skull.
No, I mean, like, in terms of there was a lot of fan backlash. Like, you have to remember from like after the season 7 premiere, there were a lot of articles that were saying, oh, is The Walking Dead just giving us torture porn? You know,
but those people were completely unaware of the comics. It seemed like.
I know.
I'm sure the AMC was not looking forward to that scene. It was one of those, I talked to Jim Barnes, one of the writers, co-executive producers last week. He was saying that, you know, Angela sets up these orange cones and then they kind of tell story around it. Like the orange cones from the comics, spikes on heads, Glenn's death, you know, governor coming through with the tank, that kind of thing. And this is something they probably weren't super looking forward to. So for it to be like AMC is going crazy, it's like, this was the biggest moment in the comics. It is the is the highest selling Walking Dead comic to this date, issue 100. So they had to tell that story. And yes, it was gratuitous, but that's the point. That's how they had to introduce Negan. It's like, this guy doesn't give a shit and it's going crazy.
Yeah, no, for me as a comic fan, I absolutely had loved that moment in the show. For me, it delivered on everything that I wanted also, but I also had forgotten like how I felt in that moment when I first read that comic. Like, yes, I did hate Negan when I first, you know, we all hated Negan at first when that issue came out. But then, you know, the more that you moved into the comics, like Negan became one of my favorite characters. And and that was the point that I was at, and the point that other comic fans were at when that episode aired. But then in the 3 years or more that have gone by since that episode premiered, I just talked to so many people who have watched that show and who have left the show or whatnot, and that episode is always the one that comes up for fans, and they're only fans of the show. And it's so interesting to me the way that people watch that episode so differently. And I think the other thing, because we were talking about Game of Thrones a little bit earlier, and I just think it's kind of, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but I think it's kind of funny that people will be like, yeah, we love like how hard Game of Thrones goes in on certain things, you know, they don't, like, you have the Red Wedding, and then people would be like, why doesn't The Walking Dead go and do things like that? And then they went and they did the thing on like the season 7 premiere, and then people are like, whoa.
Game of Thrones killed a pregnant lady. Like, come on.
Yeah, but I see both sides of it. I've had so many discussions on it over the years. Yeah.
I want to talk about our theory. Last time we spoke on the podcast was right when we got the news about season 11 being the final season, and we theorized about Georgie's role, which we've done several times before. I still think there's a chance she has some kind of tie to Commonwealth, but it is dying. It is a dying light. It is barely a glimmer. It now makes more sense that she's a part of Ginny's community from Fear the Walking Dead. I mean, Maggie's wearing the same kind of folded cowboy hat. So I don't know where do you think Georgie comes in on this?
I'm glad that you asked about this. Unfortunately, I ran out of time where like this was one thing I wanted to ask Angela about, and we just didn't get around to it because we had to talk about 1018, which we can't talk about now, but we had to talk about 1018. Ooh. So I guess my thoughts were just like, one, is Georgie still out there? Or was 1017 The Walking Dead's way of conveniently writing Georgie out of the storyline? Which I was like, that would be a bummer. Those were my two thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we got more Georgie details this episode, but it kind of was like, oh, we lost her during this sort of supply mission raid thing, and I almost wish we had flashbacks. I mean, the episode was interesting enough, but I would have loved at least one of these bonus episodes to cover, like when she's like, oh yeah, we went to a community, but it went to shit, and there was all these people and it was crazy. And you're just like, God, if only we could see any of this. Like, that sounds so interesting.
I felt that way too when Maggie was speaking with Daryl and about those things, but also when she talks about going to her Nana's house with little Herschel. And couldn't you just imagine if we were not in a pandemic, and if we would have never had these episodes if it wasn't for the pandemic. So I guess it's kind of a moot point to even talk about this a little bit, but I could have just seen, as Lauren Cohen was talking about, she was visualizing, you know, little Herschel at this oceanside house. I could have seen them like cutting to that, you know, like little flashes of like him in the water and things like that, and that would have been really like sweet. But you know, these episodes were produced the way that they were produced because of the way that the world is right now. So I don't think that was never in the cards. Something that I thought was really interesting that I found out, I don't remember if you and I spoke about this, because we haven't talked about the Reapers yet at all.
Oh, I was going to ask about the Reapers. You had an interesting tidbit about that.
I did. So I asked Angela, because when Angela and I spoke back it was February of 2020, right before like lockdown had happened, she had told me that they were like pretty deep into writing season 11 at that point. So one of my big questions for her was, when they decided that they were going to do these bonus 6 episodes, I was like, how did that affect the workflow of like the stuff that you already had for season 11? What moved up? Were the Reapers originally part of this plan for season 11? Were the Reapers were they a byproduct of these new episodes? Like, what was going on with them? And what she said to me was that, let me just find this quote that I have here. She said that the Reapers were part of their original plan for season 11. Ooh. And so originally I thought that what she meant by that was that they just moved up stuff from season 11 right here, but that's not what they did. She said that they wound up introducing this is the quote, we wound up introducing this element when we were sort of working on the season 10 extension episodes. It gave us a chance to kind of show a piece of story that we were going to skip over. So basically, and then she just said, oh, that's something else, so that doesn't matter. But no, it was just about she made a comment about Maggie Meekin, which we've already talked about,
Yeah.
Maggie Meekin a bit. But basically, like, this is just like, this is extra bonus content that like they were just going to skip over.
Oh, so are we done with the Reapers now?
No. Like, the Reapers were supposed to originally just be part of the plan for season 11. But
Right.
like this part that we see in the episode would have been like, I guess, some backstory on them that we wouldn't have gotten
Oh, I see.
otherwise.
Sure.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we do need a new villain group in the comics at this point. They reach Commonwealth. The Whisperers are pretty much completely diminished. There's like a few people walking around still, fighting the good Whisperer fight. But yeah, the only real enemy at the time is the Commonwealth Stormtroopers, and politics is like the real enemy. So yeah, that makes sense.
That's interesting that you say that, because to play devil's advocate, I was just like, do we need another group at this point? Because I feel like we have so many, like, we don't know anything about the Commonwealth, and like you and I, like, we know about the Commonwealth.
Oh, we know.
But the show only viewers, they probably think that they're bad guys right now. So for a lot of people,
and yes,
right?
Yeah.
So because they are holding our people up Terminus style in these like shipping crates or whatever.
Yes.
So to me, I was a little surprised that we were introducing a whole other group of villains. Then we have like Robert Patrick's character. I have no idea if he's supposed to be a Reaper or if he's like some other bad guy or villain.
You'll find out.
I'm just assuming he's a bad guy because of Terminator, and I feel like he just looks naturally, he just gravitates towards playing bad people. But yeah, I don't know. I was surprised that we were getting another group of people, and for me it felt very, I want to know if it felt this way for you, but when Maggie was kind of discussing this group and what happened to her with Daryl, I had 1014 vibes. I had Michonne vibes of how Michonne was like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this dark thing that happened in my past. And then all of a sudden it was like we were getting the same exact thing, but with Maggie. And I was like, have we kind of seen this before? No, we haven't seen like a group of people who are just like setting bodies on fire. I don't know what their deal is, but I don't know. It just kind of, I felt like maybe we had seen a little bit of this already.
Yeah, they feel like a Last of Us villain group, honestly. Who are those that whistling group in Last of Us 2? They were really scary. Kind of reminds me of that. But yeah, we got people blowing themselves up. That was wild. One thing I want to touch on too, we mentioned Herschel. I'm so glad that they're giving Herschel more screen time and actual lines than they did younger Judith.
Yeah, I really love that. I think going back to like Judith, I think that she was around like 4. I think she was supposed to be like 4, because then we had like the 6-year time jump, and then I think she was supposed to be like 10. But that aside, I loved seeing more of young Herschel, because in the comics, I mean, I don't know how much to like spoil.
We can say Herschel ends up growing up to be a complete dick, and when he's an adult, which is a huge bummer, but as a kid he's adorable. So hoping we can preserve that. We must protect Herschel and RJ.
I kind of hated what happened to him in the comic, because I was like, your legacy is your name, you're Glenn's son, one of the best characters in the comic, and then also just fan favorite on the show, and your namesake is literally Herschel, who was also just someone who was so impactful on the show. So to have like these two people who you're supposed to honor, like, and not live up to that, like, it was very unsatisfying for me at the end of the comic. So I hope that they're going in a totally different direction with his character on the show.
Yeah, I've thought about that. It'll be weird that if they decide to take the same kind of ending, let's say the last episode of The Walking Dead, they skip ahead 20 years and maybe Judith takes Carl's role. For those who haven't read, Carl, spoiler alert, becomes kind of like the last man standing. I mean, a lot of people survive, but he's kind of the main protagonist. He looks like the brawny man. He's, big beard and everything. Married to Sophia. Should have gotten that in the show. Anyway, so maybe they do that with Judith, but it would be weird if they did a 20-year time jump and then a year later started the Carol Darrell show, which presumably would take place back, 20 years before.
I am wondering all of these things, but also at this point, do you think that they can really do something like that? Fast forward 20 years when we still don't even know like what they're doing with the Rick Grimes movie. because I feel like the end of The Walking Dead, don't you feel like that naturally has to lead into the movie?
Yeah, you're right. And maybe the movie ends with some 20-year time jump and Rick gets to reunite with Judith. We'll see what happens.
Let me make a crazy prediction
Please.
just now because this just came to mind. Because in the comic, it becomes, there's a giant statue of Rick, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that's what everyone honors. What if it's like a giant statue of Michonne or someone else instead? Like they
I'd be
just go
fine
and
with
take
that.
there's some other giant character that they kill off instead, and like Rick winds up surviving the
I'd
show.
love that. We'll see what happens. Lots of Walking Dead news. I think we have 15 straight weeks of Walking Dead starting now. If you're listening to this, starting now, 15
Never
straight weeks.
sleeping. Never
6
sleeping.
weeks of Walking Dead, 9 weeks of Fear the Walking Dead. If you guys aren't watching Fear, please watch Fear. Start on season 6. Look at our recap videos. Season 6 of Fear is amazing so far, and I can't wait to bring you back on when that starts back up to talk about it, because Fear is outdoing itself. Thank God.
If we don't get Madison or Madison tease at this point now, because I can't believe that every time I speak to someone related to either, and if you're listening right now and you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to go and look up like, is Madison alive or something, because the Fear showrunners and Scott Gimple have both now teased to me. They have me thinking that they are maybe in talks with Kim and they're trying to get her back. I would not say this unless I felt some sort of, positive way about it. Like, who knows if it's going to happen, but like,
I think it's up to Kim, because I think she was kind of, I think they burned a bridge a little bit, letting her go. I mean, it's basically like, what if they killed Andrew Lincoln off in season 4?
Right.
He'd be pissed. And I think Kim does probably have some bad feelings. I don't want to speak for her. Maybe she's, fine about it. I don't know, but I would imagine that she doesn't feel great about it. So if they brought her back, it would probably have to be in a significant way and not some cameo. But we'll see what happens. I apologize for retweeting that article from November. I just saw it. I didn't read it, which is one of my faults.
You're one of those people now.
I read all of your articles. But I was, doing a million things. And then I saw someone post about that, freaking out about it. And I was like, oh, she must have new information. I'll read it later, retweet anyway. And then everyone's like, oh my God. And then you were like, actually, this was from like 3 months ago. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. But I mean, still relevant. Let's keep the Madison is alive thing alive.
Still relevant. Yeah.
I think so. All right. Well, Kirsten, it's been great talking to you. I'd love to have you back either at the end of Here's Negan or in between that and Fear the Walking Dead. And we can talk all things Walking Dead universe. We have so many things coming up. I wonder for the fall, I would imagine they would do season 11 and then maybe World Beyond simultaneously, or if maybe one of them can wrap up. Maybe World Beyond comes first. I don't know. Because they have their final season.
I think we talked about this, and I think that they need to air in a certain order, because I think World Beyond, if I'm not mistaken, well, that's supposed to be a bridge to the movie also. So I'm not sure what the.
That's true. Maybe someone from World Beyond shows up in season 11.
Look, how many times has Nico teased that they know where Rick Grimes is? I need Nico to be in this movie. Or I don't know, Nico basically, he makes it seem like he's going over, like
they make it seem.
Yes, thank you. Nico makes it seem like they are going to be a part of this outside of World Beyond, which I would love. I think that they're my favorite character on World Beyond.
They are so good, and we'll see what happens. But anyway, Kirsten, tell the people where they can follow you if they're not following you already, which is a crime if they're not. But for any new people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can read all of my Walking Dead content on insider.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Kirsten Acuna. And then also, should we plug what we're going to be doing for 10/18?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Also, for anyone who's on Clubhouse, Johnny and then Brandon of comicbook.com, because we usually, we've done some powwows on here. We're all going to talk 10/18 the Wednesday after it airs at 2 p.m. Eastern time. As of right now, it should be 2 p.m. Eastern time on Clubhouse. And I'm sure that will be that'll be a conversation.
Yes, I think some of the fans already know what we're talking about, but it will be interesting regardless. So excited for that conversation and for the whole fandom to be swept up in a whirlwind. But anyway, as always, Kirsten, you're awesome, one of my good friends, and thanks for coming on the podcast again.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Johnny.
And that wraps up this week's episode of Talk Dead to Me. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. We will be back next week with Lynn Collins. She is a fantastic talent, and she is joining the show next week in a very special role that will definitely have fans talking. Can't wait to talk about it. Anyway, until then, please be safe, wear a mask, watch Minari. Steven Yeun's in it and is amazing. And happy birthday to Nate.